Okay, good morning. We are on our 6th session of the 4-H orientation. I just want to adjust my, I want to adjust my camera a little bit. It's like super high right now. And I can't. Okay, I'll have to do it later. Sorry for that like craziness. So today's topic is we're going to start with developmental levels of youth, and then we're going to move into the asset approach to youth development. So let me just need to pull up my, oh, of course I didn't have it pulled up. There we go. Pull up my PowerPoint for you guys. Ooh, escape. Okay. Sorry, it's just being kind of a goofy today. You know how it usually is. It does not want to go to the right place. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and then hopefully it will pull up. I'm hoping that's what happens. Okay. All right. So let me pull up my chat box. So for you guys that are joining, do you guys see the PowerPoint on the screen? If you can type in the chat box, that would be fantastic because I can't tell. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Having 3 screens sometimes can be a bit of a challenge. Okay, so, as this is something for us to remember as 4-H professionals, but this is one of those sessions too that I highly encourage that you take back to your volunteers, because I think to me, this lays our foundation as 4-H professionals in working with young people and understanding how to work with them. What is, you always hear me talk a lot about what is age appropriate. And this is one of those things that, this is how we can tell if something's age appropriate or not. So, and we have to remember too that as we're doing this, our young people, there are 4 levels of development in a young person. You have both the physical development, the social development, emotional, and cognitive or intellectual development. And so we have to think about that. And, you're not going to have, you have to have that understanding of all of them in order to understand. You may have a young person that physically, chronologically, they may be 8, but physically they look like they're 11 or 12, but emotionally and socially they might be 6. And I've seen that multiple times. And so, that's why this is really, we have to think about it. And it's important for our volunteers to have an understanding of this as well. Also our camp counselors, all of those areas. So I'm just going to jump in and start thinking about 6 to 8-year-olds. And in our world, 5 to 7, you're going to see kind of a variety, either 5 to 7, 6 to 8. Really, it kind of goes 6 to 8-year-olds. But with that, I want to just ask a couple of questions and have you guys type in the chat box some of the characteristics of this age group, and let me know what you think the implication for us as youth development professionals. And this one, when I originally put together this PowerPoint, it was actually when Cody was 6 to 8 years old. So I had great pictures. So that's why there's lots of pictures of Cody in this one. Probably should change those now, but but if we're looking at physical development, if we have a 6 to 8-year-old, one of the characteristics of this age group is they'll be better at throwing a ball than catching it. So as 4-H professionals or even for our volunteers, what do you think an implication for that? What should we be aware of? What should we be doing to help with that? Understanding that that's the case. And you can type it in the chat. Okay, tailoring programs to fit their needs. So if we know that they're better at throwing a ball rather than catching it, what kind of balls should we be using, or what can we do with those? You know, this is just one example, but can you? I'm trying to get you guys to think a little bit too. And it is basically tailoring, but any other thoughts on that? Okay, well, so we do have, so the example they share is use larger balls, or you provide them the opportunity to throw or bounce the balls rather than always having them, catch the ball or whatever. You have them bounce it to each other, or those, that type, or use bigger balls. The other thing with this character, or with this age group, is they also like to repeat an activity. They need to repeat an activity over and over in order to master it. So this is why one of the reasons we like them to have opportunities to practice their skills. But, you have to make sure that the projects are age appropriate for them to be able to complete. So, probably not a complex item is going to be easy for them to complete. The other thing, they're better at controlling their large muscles rather than their small muscles. So again, that's kind of that bouncing the ball back and forth. They're mastering those physical skills. They're able to handle tools and materials better than they did when they were younger, but still not, so that might be that where they can practice hammering nails, maybe gluing, cutting, those types of things. When you look at social with this, or cognitive, the intellectual, they can distinguish. So think about, they can distinguish between their right and left, but they cannot tell from other people. So like, they can tell you which is right and left on themselves, but if you said, "Where's my right?" they couldn't do it. So what do you think is what's one thing, an implication for that characteristic? What do you think that's one thing that we need to be thinking about? Anybody have thoughts? If they can tell their right and left, but they can't tell what's right or left on other young people, and these are 6 to 8 year olds or 5 to 7 year olds. So what do you think an implication would be for that? And think about these are our clover bud age group. Is anybody out there? So essentially, what you have to do is you need to give instructions to them both verbally and visually. And you need to, when you describe things to them, you need to describe it using their left or right instead of your left or right. So, a lot of times we stand in front of the young people facing them and we say, use your right hand, and we hold up our right hand. Well, if they're turned around, that's their left hand. And so we have to almost turn our bodies around and say, okay, everybody, we're going to use our right hand now, and have it be the same one that they can see. They're also, just they're learning those letters and words. And this is something I think, yeah, you have to have them stand the same way you are. And then, yeah, I like that. Have them repeat the directions to you. I think that's a great idea. They're starting to learn letters and words. Nowadays, kids have to pretty much read almost by the time they go into kindergarten. It feels like it. And so, this isn't quite, but by 6, most of them can read words or a combination of words, but having them write words and letters is pretty much going to be, having them write a lot is going to be both a miserable experience for that child, unless you have a child that loves it. And I know children that love it, but it's also going to be a miserable experience for you, and a very miserable experience for for the parents. And, this is speaking from experience, and I'm sure most of you have had that experience too, where, you can have them do a little bit of writing. This is why, record books aren't required. We don't have that competitive program at this age. There's some really good examples out there from other states of things like a memory book, where they can draw a picture of their favorite activity that they did that year. Or, they might write a couple of words, but they're not writing complete sentences. So you just want to, when you're doing the activities with the young people especially, you don't want to have them writing a lot of things. They need to be doing constantly. They like to collect and sort, organize, classify. So, this is a good time for them to create collections. Or, an example, I went in one time and taught my son's Cloverbud group, which the picture with the 4 boys, that's actually, I think that was his last year in Cloverbuds. He did 3 years of a Cloverbud project or program. But his 1 year I went in and taught the young people about horses. And guess what? I taught them all about horses, and we didn't have any physical horses there. But what I did was I had lots of toy horse, like the Breyer horses, but they weren't necessarily Breyer horse. I had a couple Breyers, but I can't remember the name of them, but they're just little horses, and they had all different breeds. I had, basically I could teach them all about breeds of horses and colors of horses without, with these little figurine horses or these little toys. And what was interesting is then I had them, okay, so here's all of them. I want you to sort them by color. And they would sort them by color, and then let's sort them by, who has the biggest head, or, we just kind of talked about the different characteristics of the horses. And that was fantastic because they love to organize and they love to sort things. And so that was a way to get them involved and not just listen to me standing up there talking the whole time. So we also talk about, some of their social, let me look at the other, sorry. They also, at this age group, they think about their thinking is in reality and accuracy. They cannot think, it's very concrete. They don't have any kind, really, they have an imagination, but it's still, it's a pretty concrete imagination. And they're also, they're beginning to understand that cause and effect relationship. So if this happens, this is going to happen. So you could start doing a few things related to that. Nothing complex, just simple there. So when we think about their emotional development, what do you think? So they worry about failure at this age, and they worry about being criticized at this age. I think we've all probably seen it where something's happened at this age. What's the first thing they do? Start crying, when they're singled out, or, when they failed at something. So what do you think we could do? What do you think we could do as 4-H professionals or 4-H volunteers to help with that? What's an implication for us? I'm giving you guys a couple minutes to type, or a minute or so to type. So if we have somebody that's, if we have a young person at this age group, we know that they worry about failure or being criticized. So what can we do within our youth program to help with that so that they don't feel that way? Positive reinforcement, that's a good one. One thing that they suggest is if you're teaching them a new concept, which I've seen this happen, you don't teach it all to them all at once and say, okay, go forth and have fun doing it. What you do is you break it down step by step by step, and you have them. So step one, you show them how to do it and they all do it. Step two, you show them all how to do it and they do it, instead of showing them the whole process and then doing it. An example, the kid, one year we made a group learning. Yeah, exactly. One year we were doing they were making a paper quilt, and I can't remember, I think it was on Citizenship, or maybe it was, no, I think that one was on the 100th anniversary of 4-H, and so they were talking about some of the people in 4-H and what they did. What they did was, so the first step was they each got a piece of paper that described somebody that was important to 4-H in the state. And so we talked to them about, okay, now you need to read, about that person. Or I can't, because they couldn't really read that much. I don't remember exactly. But then so we had them do that. And then the next step, they were all given their little quilt square, their paper quilt square. And they were told to draw a picture of that person. It might have been Citizenship. That might have been what they were doing. And then we showed, okay, so they did that. Then the next step was to punch the holes in the paper so that we could tie them all together. So they did that. And then the next step was to figure out how they wanted to set it up. And then we did, so we broke it down step by step, and it worked out so much better. Had we just said, okay, this is what we're going to do, here's the steps, and just turned them loose, it would have been chaos and it would not have worked. So yeah, Kenny said more group work activities without winners and losers, individual support with new concepts. That's exactly right. This is why we say so much, that we should not, they should never be in a competitive situation at this age group. They're going to think that they can be in a competitive situation. And I know all of our parents think that they can be in a competitive situation. But the problem is when they win, fantastic. And that's kind of one of the other, pieces. But then when they don't win, they don't understand why they didn't win. And I've seen that so much. One of the social characteristics is, they need to be first or be the best, and they're bossy about that. And so, and I've seen it over and over and over again with this age group. And so that's one of the reasons. And, I know we all get into discussions with our parents that their child is perfect and they can handle a 3,000, or a 1,500-pound steer because they've been doing it since they were 2, and they can compete, they're fine. And, that's when you, again, just have to tell them, I'm sorry, but, your child may be wonderful and they may be able to do that. But as a youth development program, we base our programming on research, on the research that's out there, and this is what the research says. And we have to have a program for all youth, and we have to, our program has to be designed for all youth, and just because your child can doesn't mean that the next child can. So again, and I have said it over and over and over again, and as I always tell people with this age group, with this Cloverbud age group, if you have a parent that just won't listen, send them to me, because I mean, this sounds horrible, but I have absolutely no sympathy for those. Those kids can have a fantastic experience. As I said, Cody had 3 years of a Cloverbud program, and he loved it. In fact, he would have preferred to stay in that, I think, because we made it a positive experience, and they didn't just learn about one thing. He got to learn. I think the picture of the 4 boys was after they came back from an adventure to the local park with their cameras, and they learned about photography and how to take pictures. And and the week before they had just been learning about rabbits, and the week before that they had been learning about nutrition, and so they did something different every week. Also, some other emotional, they seek fairness. They want to be nice to everybody so that others are nice to them. They seek that parental or that adult improvement. This is the age group when they're doing an activity, they're always, hey, look at what I did. They're always wanting to show you what they did at every step of the way, which is great. You just have to go, oh, that's fantastic, wonderful. They're cooperative, they're helpful, they always want to help you set up. So you have to find ways for them to help. If it's, when we used to do foods and nutrition, we always did some kind of trail mix with the kids, where they would learn about the different components of the trail mix. So what we would do is have one child set up all the bowls. We'd have one person set up all the spoons, and we'd have another person pour chocolate chips into one of the bowls. We'd have another person pour peanuts into a bowl. Like, we'd give each one of the kids that wanted to do something a job, and simple jobs, but something that they could help set up. And then we have the social development. And when we look at social development, again, I said in that social area, they really see that need to be first, to be the best. And they may be very bossy at that age group. I always love when they go to get in line, this is where, they all have to be in the front of the line. So you have to, if they all want to be in the front of the line, what's one thing that you could do as a person working with those young people? This should be a pretty easy one for you guys to answer. Any thoughts on that? If they want to be, if you have a child that wants to be, first in line, how would you handle that? One thing I would do is okay, so today Johnny gets to be first in line. Yeah. Create a line leader and rotate through. Yep. That's exactly. So you give everybody that chance. Yeah. So, they also like to engage in group discussions. So this is where you have learning activities that simulate conversation. So you do, when you have those discussions with this age group, you can make sure that they are, that everybody is having a chance to give their input on that. They're, you know, at this age group, they're learning how to be friends, and they may have several best friends at one time. So, which is okay. You know, you just, you need to be aware of that. They're also, you know, they're becoming more aware of their peers and those, and their opinions, but they're also still very much family oriented. All right, so just a couple, this is a puzzle that we do, and if you ever do this with volunteers, these puzzles are great, or this is good for like teen counselor trainings or teen leader trainings. These puzzles are great, and you're going to get copies of all of these puzzles. What you do is you cut them up into pieces. You know, each, you know, obviously the blue is a piece, and you know, so you cut up all the puzzles. You mix it. There's 4 of them. There's the 6 to 8. What is there? 6 to 8. 9 to 11, 12 to 14, and 15 to 18. So you cut all of them up and you mix all of the age groups up, and then you mix your group up into different category, you know, into different teams, and they're given an envelope that have all different kinds of pieces in it, and they have to figure, but you tell them, okay, you are the, you know, you're putting together the puzzle for the 6 to 8 year old group, and they have to figure out, is this skill is this developmentally appropriate for a 6 to 8 year old? And they have to, and then they have to, you know, they may have to go trade pieces with another team, which, I mean, that's the whole point, is for them to figure out, oh, this is not for this age group. And they will have to trade. Eventually, I will tell you, they all figure out the color scheme, and then they just go trade the colors. But it takes a while, and they really get to thinking about it. But this is, you know, here are some characteristics of 6 to 8 year olds. So they are, you know, you can see, you know, they can only handle one mental operation at a time. You know, they tend to behave in ways to avoid punishment. This is where I said my child was such a people pleaser at this age group, and I so miss that today. Because he now likes to challenge, you know, as we move into the older age groups, you're going to find out he now likes to challenge his teachers. He likes to challenge adults in their thinking, which is, again, very developmentally appropriate. It's hard as a parent, but as a youth development professional, you know, I'm amazed every day at the things that come out, and I just remind myself every day, this is developmentally appropriate, this is developmentally appropriate. But as a parent, it drives me crazy. But at this age group, they were so nice because they were little people pleasers. And so, you know, some other ways as we work with this age group, you know, we need to remember that craft projects are going to be messy. I mean, it's just a fact of life. Their activities are really designed to be active. And that's the whole point, is for them to be active and engaged. They need to be using both their small muscles and their large muscles. As I said, they're better with their large muscles than their small muscles, but how are they ever going to develop small muscle coordination if they don't ever use them? And, you know, small group activities are best. And if you can break them into groups, having them interact with different kids, that's better, different children. Don't always let them go with their friends. So, and then, you know, always, you know, they need lots of praise. So this is where we really praise them. Any questions on that age group? The other thing I can do is I can actually, here, I'm going to move everybody to allow to talk. Sorry, I forgot to do that. If you do want to actually say something, you can just unmute your mic and you'll be able to speak. I always forget that I have that option in this system. But you can also type it. Any questions about 6 to 8 year olds? Okay. This is a fun group. I always said when I was going and when I was working on my degree, because I was training to be a high school teacher, I always said if I didn't like what I was doing, I was going to go back and be a kindergarten teacher, because kindergarten teachers, yes, it's challenging, but yeah, and yes, you're exhausted at the end of the day, but they still think you're really cool. Like, everybody remembers their kindergarten teacher. And they're learning so much and so fast. It's just kind of a cool thing. All right, 9 to 11-year-olds. So what do we know about 9 to 11-year-olds? What are some things that you guys know about 9 to 11-year-olds? Okay, that's fine, Sharon, if you don't have a mic. It works. But what do you guys know about 9 to 11-year-olds? One thing we know that with this age group, their physical development, when you look at that kind of 6 to 8-year-old group, that their physical development, you're going to have the anomalies of one or two kids that are going to be, large, or they're going to be either really, really small or really, really big. But those, but for the most part, they're kind of all the same size. Close to it. And boys and girls are pretty much the same size at that age group. So you move into this 9 to 11-year-old group, the girls actually start shooting up and the boys kind of stay the same for a while. But they are, that physical development is really starting to become more prevalent and really come to the forefront. Unfortunately, and it just makes me sick to say this, but they're showing nowadays that even at this age group, the sexual maturity is starting to come into play. And you are going to have, it's going to be more of an anomaly again, but you will have young people in this age group that are reaching puberty. And so you have to be aware of that. So, some other things, they're very active. They have lots and lots of energy at this age. So what do you think we should do at that age group? Can they sit and listen to you for hours? Probably not. Okay. This is where they're starting to increase that the small muscle coordination, and so you can start introducing some of those types of situations to them. Within their cognitive development or their intellectual development, this is really probably the physical development. It's such a huge age range, but or such a huge variety at this age group. But with the cognitive, there's some things that we need to be thinking about. So they have interests that are rapidly changing. They're into this one week and they're into something else the next week. So as youth professionals, what can we do with that? I mean, within our program, this is where they're starting to move into 4-H age. And so they're starting to focus on projects, a single topic project. But what can we do knowing that they have interests that rapidly change? I think this was the age group that one week we were collecting rocks, and the next week we were collecting coins, and the next week we were collecting bottle caps. One week and so what can we do to encourage that and not, so they don't get bored? giving you guys time to type. I always have a hard time when it's quiet. Sorry. Anybody have any thoughts? Well, one of my thoughts on this is you want to have brief learning experiences. So they may be learning about, so they're taking a market beef project, but can you spend 2 hours teaching them about nutrition, how to build a ration with this age group? Probably not. So what you need to do is have, 15 minutes of, you might be talking about nutrition the entire time, with those young people, but you need to break it up into smaller chunks where they're learning about a different aspect of that program or of that topic. And so, the other thing to do is maybe, you do 2 or 3 different project ideas in one meeting with this age group. Because if you notice, if you've ever been around this age group, one of the things that they say is they need guidance from adults to stay on task to finish that task. And that is very true. You need to make sure you have, enough adults with that age group that you almost have, 1 adult per every 1 or 2 kids, so they can keep them on task. And so I think that is, that's really important. And so, you have adults working with small groups, and again, because they get bored with the same topic, or the same idea. So you have to get them that idea. So their thinking is still concrete, but at this age, they're starting to think about things in a more logical or a symbolic way. So giving them experiences with those senses are still good. It's good for them to think about things concretely, but then you have them think about them a little bit more in a symbolic way. Again, they see things as black or white, either or. So you have to give them concrete examples, but then also get them to think about the middle ground. So nothing's coming to my mind right now. I should think of an example of that, but you want to they're easily motivated, they're eager to try new things. This is where a lot of times you have young people that want to sign up for like 10 different projects, and they might finish 2 of them because they want to try new things always. And so you have to really get that variety of learning experiences for them. And, it might be that they don't, maybe at club meetings, they can have a chance to learn something, different than what they're doing in their project. They usually do best when the work is done in small pieces. So again, kind of like the 6 to 8-year-olds, you need to give them an outline. You don't have to take them step by step, but you need to give them an outline so they understand the different pieces and the different steps to doing that. Some of the other things, their academic abilities are going to vary greatly. Some may be reading very, very well. Some may be not reading so well. They tend to use good judgment here, and, they have those interests in hobbies and collections at that age. Some of their social development. So, they're always looking to they look to adults for approval. So we need to remember that. Even at this age group, now this is where, we don't allow competition with clover buds. But even at this age group, they say they prefer individual achievements over competition. So I think, and they say we should seldom put them in a competitive situation with their friends, because they don't know how to interact with their friends when they're in competitive situations. I think they always say, oh, my kid's ready for competition, but is that child truly ready for competition, or do they just want to be in the arena with their buddies at this, with this age group? So we need to think about that a little bit. I mean, granted, I'm not going to say, okay, no more competitive events for this age group, but let's think about how we can balance that. You can do individual or group success, and not always have to have them compete against their buddies and their other friends. Anybody else have any ideas on that with this age group? Because I would be lynched if I said, we weren't going to have competitive events for 4-H, for this age group. It's hard enough with clover buds. But other thoughts? Anybody had any successes with that? Oh, sorry, Cindy. So the question was, so this age group, it says, the research shows that they prefer individual achievements over competition. And so, what they're saying is they shouldn't be put into competition with their friends. And, we all know with, as soon as a young person reaches 4-H age, to be in a regular 4-H club, that, competition starts. But I'm just trying to look for examples. Does anybody have any examples of things that you could do that aren't necessarily putting them in direct competition with their friends? Like, if anybody's had any good examples of that. Because I'm not going to say that we're not having competitive events for that age group. It's not going to happen. One thing, if you look on this slide, on the picture, it shows the girls jump roping. Okay. Yeah, that could be, they split into beginner and advanced classes. Yeah. And in shooting sports, they're kind of individual, but it shows them jump roping. This is a program, and I can't remember what state has this, but a lot of states actually do have jump roping. They have like double Dutch teams, and these girls are super good. And there's boys in there too, but they're doing it as a team, and they're doing it, they're having fun with their friends. And so that's one example. Shooting sports, you might have just a fun match rather than going, and shooting sports is a little bit different in the fact that the kids, like, you aren't all in a show ring, and the judges judging all of those kids at the same time, but they're but each kid goes up to shoot individually. Yes, it ends up being a competition in the end, but nobody, you're not shooting like you shoot, I shoot, you shoot, I shoot, and we know what the outcome is at the end. So that's, there's some examples. When we do static exhibits, they're not head to head with their, they're all competing against each other, but it's not all at the same time. So that's, that could be one, or that could be a few examples. Some other things with this age group, they like to join organized groups. So, you know, this is where we see they love the 4-H. They're also very loyal to their programs. You know, this is where they really want the shirts that say, you know, they're part of this group, they're part of this club. And I like that. Most of our clubs have fun classes and they can put it in the fair to be judged, but they don't have to. And that could be, yeah. I mean, there's a variety of things that we can do. You know, this is where they start coming up with the code language and passwords. You know, girls put signs on the doors. I actually need to, I think I might go steal, I might ask permission. One of my friends in Washington, she's a 4-H regional specialist in Washington. She has 2 girls that are, well, she has 2 boys that are teenagers, and she has 2 girls that are in this age group. And they have a sign on their door that's the rules for entering their room for the boys. You know, the boys have to follow these rules if they go into the girls' room. Very age appropriate. And so I really, to me, you know, I need to go borrow that picture because it's perfect for this age group. You know, they have that, you know, they're kind of coming up with their own rules, their own passwords, you know, those types of things. And I found we're cleaning a bunch of stuff, and even when we moved, I found a whole bunch of Cody's stuff from this age group where him and his friend had made up a code language. You know, this is this word, you know, and trying to make it so mom and dad couldn't read stuff. And, you know, I can remember sitting in my friend's tree. You know, there was a tree near her house that we would go down, and that was our clubhouse, and we would have our secret language down there. And, you know, so those are the types of things that are kind of fun, and we should encourage and figure out ways that we could, you know, that we could incorporate that. They do prefer to be with members of their own sex. I think it's important that you know, we cannot segregate, you know, here's the girls group, here's the boys group, but you will find with this age group, when they have club meetings, all the girls sit here and all the boys sit here. Even I was laughing, we had Cody's 8th grade graduation a couple weeks ago, and they had chairs on one side and chairs on another with an aisleway down the middle, and I kind of had to laugh because all the girls were on one side with a few boys mixed in, you know, and all the boys were on the other side with a few girls mixed in. But it was very much a divided, you know, and they didn't have assigned seats. They just sat where they sat. And so it even kind of bumps up into that age group. But with this one, it's very prevalent. You know, one of the things that I've noticed that happens, and this happens across the country, at camp, you know, we have 8 to 12-year-olds there, but we tend to have dances. Well, dances at this age group, you know, they're not going to dance boy girl. So that's why you just have a party, and you might have music playing, but you do line dances, and you do you have group dances rather than individual dances. And so even the word dance, you know, like I'm going to go to a dance for this age group, they're not going to be super receptive to that. So we need to be thinking about other ways to phrase those things. Might be the same thing you were planning, just a little bit, you know, but with this age group, I would definitely not have, you know, I would have it as group activities at something like that. This is where, you know, they look up and they imitate older youth. And so this is where, you know, our teen leaders are really important, and our teen leaders need to have a really good understanding that they are role models, and they need to behave in such a way, because this age group is going to intimidate they're going to act the same way. And so, you know, they really need to but it's important for that to happen. And their acceptance in a peer group is an important reward. And so, you know, you when they're doing when you're giving, you know, like every year clubs give, you know, little awards for the year, you make sure that that group, especially with this age group, are giving group applause. Everybody gets applause and there's no put downs. You know, that, you know, everybody gets the same applause. And then emotional development, you know, they feel that need for acceptance and worthwhile. Their independence is being is shown by they're starting to be a little bit disobedient, or they might start back talking or a little bit of rebellion. It's not a lot, but you can start seeing it at this age group. And so you have to almost give them a little bit of leeway in that, but they cannot be disrespectful in any manner. But, you know, if you've got a child that all of a sudden decides, I don't want to do this activity, that's fine. You don't need to do this activity, but your option is do the activity, or you go sit right here and you're quiet and you do not disturb anyone else. You know, you give them another option, but that's kind of their way of showing that independence. You know, again, they are developing those decision-making skills. So that's why, you know, number one, they're starting to show that independence, but you're also going to give them an option. You know, you're going to do this or you're going to do this. Make a decision about which one you want to do. You don't give them like more than two choices, but you give them two choices. And, you know, they also, you know, at this point, they still need that involvement with a caring adult. Any questions about this age group? Okay, this is the puzzle for this age group. So, you know, you can see some of those. I mean, we've talked about each one of those. Okay, 12 to 14-year-olds. And I will tell you right now, this is probably, I'm in this age group, so it's very challenging. But it's a lot, you know, it is, I have a lot of respect for middle school teachers. But, you know, and walking into a room with this age group can be very energizing, and it can be very terrifying for our, both as professionals and also for our volunteers. And so this is really a prime age for them to engage, to start engaging them in leadership roles and giving them that voice of decision, you know, of decision making. You know, they need to be considered participants at this, you know, rather than recipients of our educational opportunities. I mean, we should always feel like that with all of our kids, but at this age group, you know, it's really starting to become more and more relevant for them. You know, it is, and it's a great place to start exploring those principles. So this is where they really they start feeling that ownership for their projects, and you start involving them in some of the planning processes to get them to have buy-in or commitment to the program. So we look at this, you know, this age group, again, they're starting to hit that sexual maturity, the growth patterns. There's a pretty big difference, again, between the boys and the girls. The girls are usually maturing physically at a much faster rate than boys, but it is at kind of this age range that they start really, their physical development is probably at its peak at this point. As far as, you know, I can remember myself at I think it was 5th grade, so it was a little bit younger than this, but not, you know, I grew 12 inches in 1 year. I've seen it happen this year with my own child. He grew, I believe we're at about 10 inches now for the year. He is now, when we started the year, he was barely 5, he was maybe 5'1". He is now a quarter inch shorter than I am at 5'6". So he will be, I mean, we always laugh where I was like, well, in a month he will be taller than I am. So, you know, there is those huge rapid changes, but with that comes, with that comes a lot of clumsiness, they're still trying to figure out their bodies, because, you know, when you go from 5'1" to 5, or no, he was more than that, because he's grown a bunch, like close to 10 inches. So he must have been even shorter than 5'1". But, you know, when you're going from this to this, you're not, you know, and he went, you know, these kids are going from, most of them are going from like a youth size shoe to an adult size. You know, we went from a youth size 6 to an adult size 10 with one stop in between of an 8 for about 3 months. And so, you know, you got to think about that. You know, they're trying to figure out how to even walk, because you went from this little foot to a big foot, and it's, you know, it's tough. So you have to really, you know, those are some of those physical things that we have to think about. You know, they are, you know, with girls, they're worried about their development. You know, they're trying to figure out how to interact with new parts to their bodies. Boys have got that, their voices changing. I know, I was laughing, we have a good friend of ours, a good friend of Cody's, and this young man looks like he's probably 16, 17. He's big, he's, you know, physically he's, you know, he's a good sized kid. And he was complaining to me one day in the car, because he's like, Cody has such a deep voice and my voice still sounds like a little kid. I haven't, like, his voice is starting to change now, but he doesn't have that, you know, and it frustrates him, because all of his friends now have, their voices have changed, but he has not. And so, you know, here physically he looks like this big kid, but yet he still kind of sounds like a little kid. And so we have, you know, again, they're thinking about that's important to them at this age group. Some other intellectual abilities, you know, they find justice and equality to be important issues. I love it when the teachers have discussions about, you know, doing the right and wrong, and how do they do things. And also, you know, when they start having like some political discussions, it's kind of fun to, when they come home and start talking about that. They're really starting to come into their own values and beliefs. Whether we agree with those values and beliefs or not, they are, you know, they're starting to develop their own. My child, you know, he comes home on a daily basis, and I'm like, where did this kid come from? Because he is so ultra conservative, and I just look at him going, this is not, you know, I don't know where he's getting this, but it's real. Again, you know, like I said, it's from a youth development perspective, it's really fun to watch him and to have that discussion. Now I've stepped in and said, okay, now you may have these beliefs, but we have to remember not everybody has these same beliefs, and we have to be, you can disagree with them, but we have to be respectful in that disagreement, you know, and that was especially true with some of his teachers. And so, you know, we have to, those are things that we need to remember. And we need to teach our young people those skills, because, you know, it's still all about them at this age group too. And so, you know, socially, it's really all about them. And we need to be able to teach them that civil discourse and how to be respectful, disagree in a respectful manner. So, you know, they can imagine consequences at this age group. You know, they can, if this doesn't work, you know, if you do this, what's going to happen? what if it doesn't work? What can you do differently? This is really, if they start failing at this age, that's when you step in and say, okay, so that didn't work. What can we do differently next time? And they're starting to be able to figure that out. They want to explore the world beyond their community. Now, this is a little bit different in today's world because our young people are connected to the out. My mom and I were having a discussion the other day, and she said, I think the world is just it's much worse for kids today. And I said, Mom, I don't think the world has changed. I think what's changed is our connection to things outside of our own little world, and the news is reporting more. I don't remember everything being reported. I know things were happening, but it just wasn't being reported like it is today. Because there's instant access. I mean, as soon as something happens, I can remember, it was a big deal to have a special report. Now they're on Facebook Live, if the roads are bad. You have that instant, it's instant gratification almost of knowing what's going on in the world. And so, we know the instant, pretty much it's made known that somebody passes away in the entertainment world or whatever, where, in the past it may have taken, but our young people are exposed to so much more. And that's, I think that's the difference. But, so they can explore that, but giving them an opportunity to be involved. You can start taking them, we have opportunities within the 4-H program that we could take young people to different things. One of the things they have in DC, several of you have heard of Citizenship Washington Focus, which are 15 to 18-year-olds. Well, they have a program called Leadership Washington Focus. They focus more on the leadership skills at that one than the citizenship, but that is designed for this 12 to 14 to give them their first taste of kind of that national exposure and that national experience. But then they also, but it's designed developmentally appropriate for them. There's also, this is the age group, they should not be going to camp as campers. 12-year-olds that's pushing it with 8-year-olds, but you could bump them in. But you need to be doing something special with that age group. You could be doing, some kind of leadership activity with them in a camp in a camp setting. But they shouldn't necessarily, you're looking at 14-year-olds, they could start taking on some of those team leader roles, but it is a little bit, you can see a difference. There's a big difference between 14 and 15-year-old. I know you guys probably don't necessarily agree with that, but I think, if you really look at it, there is just kind of something happens, but but you can start building them into that leadership role. But 13, they really need to have something of their own to get those experiences. So they're starting to become interested in activities that involve the opposite sex. They're starting to learn how to talk to the opposite sex, how to live with just how to interact with them. And so giving them healthy ways to participate in this. So it might be fundraising, it might be some kind of service learning activity, it could be, planning group, those types of things. They're looking more at their peers and their family. So at this point, they're looking for peer recognition rather than parent approval. And so this is really where you can start getting them involved in the teen councils, planning boards, those types of things. They're starting to question authority and family values. And so you really have to put realistic parameters on them at this age group. And, they tend to reject. They don't like ready-made solutions from adults. They really want to be part of the solution, being part of developing that solution. So, really, if you're struggling with this somebody in this age group, you might want to take the time to talk to them individually and help them work through that, and really to discuss those issues with them. And then they see themselves, this age group, as I said, they see themselves as always on center stage, and you have to give them a chance to either choose when or if they're on stage. Again, at this 8th grade ceremony, there was a kid that got up and spoke, and I mean, this kid was very funny. You could just tell he was a well likable kid. And then there was another young man that was trying too hard to be funny. If that makes, like, we've all seen that where they're trying too hard to be funny, and it wasn't funny. I mean, and Cody said, "Oh no, that kid's annoying." And so you have to almost pull them aside and say, okay, you need to like tone it down a bit. Not everything is, you can't be center stage for everything. And so, again, that's, it's very age appropriate. Their body changes can set them up for situations of embarrassment. You need to, at this age group, don't plan activities that compare one youth to another. You compare their skills to a standard rather than, oh, you can't, you're not as good as Johnny or whatever. They need to have standards. They're seeking privacy from parents or adults, so what you do is you give them the task, and then as an adult, you maybe stand back. They're going to come to you for help, but you stand back and give that group their privacy to chat. Hopefully that makes sense. And then again, here is our, here's the puzzle. Any questions about that age group? Okay, last age group, 15 to 18-year-olds. So, again, this is where they're very concerned about body image. So you don't want to be making comments that criticize or compare stature, size, or shape. You don't want to, you may have a young person that's a little bit overweight, but you don't want to necessarily say that to them. You may want, that might be where you bring in just somebody to talk about nutrition and proper nutrition. They're going to know. I mean, they understand it. You can give them experiences around body image, etiquette, grooming, hairstyles, health, fitness. Those are things that you can do. There is a smaller range in size and maturity. You don't have the extremes. It's, they're starting to close those gaps again with their, with the size and the maturity. You're going to have your outliers, but the overall gap has started to increase. There's opportunities to do different things. We used to have, and I'm trying to think, and when I was in Michigan, we used to always do we had what they called exploration days. I was trying to think of what the name of that one was. It was their teen program, and they would always have a workshop, one session. Usually they were 3 to 6 hours. I think they were 6 hours a piece, and they would talk about, they would like, how do you dress for your body type? How, it's mostly girls, obviously, but they would talk about what kind of hairstyle you should have for your facial shape. And they would, set it up where they could actually, they'd have the hairdressers come in and do the simulations, where you can put your face in and do different hairstyles and such. they didn't actually do that, but they, but they gave them those experiences. And that was always a super helpful, super popular workshop. And so, maybe there's something you do in your community that could be like that. Other things, they do tend to have a realistic views of the limits that they have for their own body. They know when they've reached their limit at this point, where as you move younger, they don't necessarily. Within their intellectual abilities, they're starting to demonstrating that acquired knowledge. So letting them start planning events is great. Letting them, they're ready to be creative, and let them, and then give them a level of responsibility. But as adults, remember that they are still young people, and that, they may not completely follow through, and they may not completely, you have to be there to help them through that process, and not criticize them for not following through. You just have to be there to help them. They can consider many perspectives of an issue, and so giving them that time, especially with this age group, to have those discussions on current issues, I think is great. They're going to lose patience with meaningless activities, so you give them more of those upfront activities. So you give them the opportunity for teen leadership, where they are actually leading the project, that they are speaking to the community members, instead of you always going out and speaking to the community about the 4-H program. You should be bringing young people in. Now, the one thing that I have found is so many times we bring them with us, but we've not trained them. We've not given them the skills or the knowledge that they need to be successful. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with, we had put together the Youth Champions group this year of teens, and with that, it was we had them ready to go if we needed to go testify to the legislature for the enhancement request. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get that opportunity this year, and so it was fine. We just, but they are still, we now have them ready to go and to talk to community groups. So, we did 8 weeks of training with those young people, or we did 8 sessions of training. We talked to them about how do you testify in front of the legislature, and I had a former legislator and a lobbyist both come in and talk to them about how do you act? How do you, what kind of things do you need to say? And then we had them write their 5-minute elevator speech. Tell me about your 4-H experience. But we worked with them on that, so that they weren't just, it was very, very concise. We also did a session on how do you write for the media? How do you write for social media? What do you do on social media? What were the other ones? I can't even remember. Oh, how to write a thank you note to somebody. How do you write a letter to your legislator or to a stakeholder? And so, that was one thing. And you could repeat that within your, you could do something similar within your county. You probably don't need to go that in depth, but the plan is that I want to do that every year and have, this group of teens that are ready to go and represent us as a state, but we've given them the skills that they need in order to be successful at it. Our young people have great speaking skills, but sometimes they don't always say exactly what they need to say. And hopefully, it was unfortunate because I feel like they felt like it was kind of a waste of their time, but it really, because we didn't get to go testify to the legislature, but hopefully they will at some point get to have that opportunity. They did, I think almost all of them came to Capitol Day or to 4-H Day at the legislature, and they did get that opportunity to interact with legislators, and hopefully it gave them some experience. So they're also searching for intimacy at this age when you look at their social development. So, you know, you need to give them a healthy place to interact with the opposite sex. So things like trips, dances, this is where dances are very appropriate. They can commit to follow through with service. So you do, you know, they should be doing some service projects and coming up with the ideas. They want those adult leadership roles, and so you have them plan their own programs. You know, have them, you could be there, but don't do that, you know, work with them, make sure everything is, you know, risk management. You know, you're going to be kind of the mean gatekeeper in some ways, because you want to make sure things are, you know, appropriate as far as risk management and our rules and regulations, those types of things. But and again, they desire respect. So you use them as spokespersons in your community. And I know a lot of you are already doing that in your community, but you know, it is very developmentally appropriate. They like to take on multiple roles. So, you know, you plan activities that will give them multiple experiences. You know, maybe they want to learn about this and they want to help with this. And maybe they want to be a day camp counselor and they want to, you know, then also help with the service project and a variety of things. They're also searching out career possibilities. So, you know, it's always important for us when we are working with our young people to give them some of those skills, or maybe lead them in that direction. Maybe, you know, if you know that a young person wants to be a veterinarian and you have a connection with a local veterinarian, then I think it's very appropriate for you to try to work, you know, and they're taking some of those projects, work with that individual to see if you can get them an internship of some kind, or, you know, have them volunteer at that facility. Or, you know, when I was in the county, I almost always had a teen that thought they wanted to be an extension educator, or they wanted to work in 4-H, and so they always volunteered in the office after school. I usually couldn't pay them, but they would come in for, you know, 2 or 3 days a week, or even 1 day a week, and I would just have them do, you know, they could make copies for me, they could help set up for a program, a whole variety of things, and it was fantastic, and they got lots of good experience doing that. So, you know, there are those, you can do that. They also see adults as fallible. You know, you have to be willing as an adult to be wrong, and you know, the group is not going to put you on a pedestal by any stretch, and you have to admit when you're wrong. You know, as a parent, that's tough to do. As a youth professional, that's tough to do, because we don't want to be wrong, but it is important that we, you know, that we are willing to tell our mistakes. So this is the puzzle again. You know, it's one of those that is, you know, that I think, and like I said, if you do this with another group, I think it's really important that you know, I think this activity is a great hands-on activity to do with young people. So, and I know it is 10:20, and I need to remember this every time I do this. It takes me a long time to go through developmental levels, because I think it is so critical to our work. And I know, you know, we talk a lot about, is it developmentally appropriate? And I think it's important for us as youth professionals to understand what is developmentally appropriate. And so I'm not going to get to the asset approach. I think what I'm going to do is the PowerPoint and the handouts are in this time's session, and I'm going to leave them in there, but I think I will talk about that in next month during the webinar. And so, you know, if you can join us, great. We will record it again, and so, but I just, you know, I can't do it justice in 10 minutes, because again, I think it's a really I think it's to me, it's a great topic, and it's one that I'm pretty passionate about. And if any of you remember, or you know, when you came to the trainings that we had this this spring, I talked about the Thrive model, and we were kind of moving towards that. Well, the Thrive model is really based on all of these theories or all of these concepts that I'm sharing in the next 2 sessions. And the asset approach, I think, is definitely one. I know it's very ingrained in there. And so I want to be able to take the time to share it with you. So do you guys have any questions about what is developmentally appropriate? Oh, sorry, I wanted to share some of these others. So every year, the Benoit College out of Wisconsin, it is BEINO or BENOIT College in Wisconsin, puts out the mindset of the college student. And what they do is they talk about the freshman class. And what I did find this year too is this year's class of freshmen, now they're sophomores, was the last class of millennials in college. Next year, we are moving into a new generation. And so we actually have, they're entering the workforce essentially, because, those Gen Zs that are not in our system, that are not, they're all going to be entering the workforce. And so we really have, there's 4 generations and potentially 5 generations in the workplace. There are very few silent generation individuals in the workplace, but some of them, I know my dad had somebody from the silent generation that was working for him up until about 3 years ago. When his health just got to the point where he couldn't work anymore. But there are a few that like to work, and so they're doing some things. So there's potentially 5, but these are some things as you think about the young people that entered college this year. They're the last class that were born in the 1900s. So everybody, they're starting to enter. Electronic signatures have always been legally binding on the as the pen and paper kind for this for this age group. In college, they think of themselves as consumers and who have borrowed a lot of money to get there. And if you think about it that way in a college situation, that changes the way you think about the way we offer programs. They've always had emojis to cheer them up. They've never been able to use a Montgomery Ward catalog as a booster seat. Donald Trump has always been a political figure to them, as a Democrat, as an independent, and as a Republican, not necessarily as an elected official, but he's always been in some kind of political figure. They've always been able to get reward points by paying their taxes with credit cards. And in their lifetime, BlackBerry has gone from being a wild fruit to a communications device to a wild fruit again. They've always been searching for Pokemon. Pokemon has been in existence for the class that just finished their freshman year. Pokemon has always been in existence for them. Dora the Explorer and her pet monkey Boots helped set them on the course for discovery. Whatever the subject, there's always been a blog for it. Ketchup has always come in green. They never got to see Jimmy Kimmel and Ben Stein co-host a quiz show or Dennis Miller provide commentary for the NFL. How many of you remember that? The image of Sacagawea has always been adorned on a dollar coin, if you can find one. So if you guys have I call it a Sacagawea dollar, but it's always been there. Justin Timberlake has always been a solo act, and you can see these others. So it really is. And then also just the things that I've learned. So when we think about these age groups, let's think about, I've learned that you can spread peas out on your plate and it looks like you ate more. I've learned that you should never jump out of a second-story window using a sheet for a parachute. And so as we're working with this age group, think about these come straight from this age, from a child this age. I learned that you shouldn't confuse a black crayon with a Tootsie Roll. I've learned that when you have 3 of your wild friends in the car, the driver freaks. I've learned that you can't hide a piece of broccoli in a glass of milk. I've learned that when you laugh and drink soda pop at the same time, it comes out your nose. I've learned that goldfish don't like Jell-O. I've learned that girls sweat just as much as boys. So those are, again, as we are thinking about our young people, let's think about, keep those things in mind. And I highly suggest, I'm going to type in, I'm typing in the Benoit College because it is great. They actually have them all the way back into the, I don't think they did it in the 80s, but they have it all through the 90s. And, it's kind of fun to go back and look at those and you think about that mindset of our young people. So I would, it's a fun thing to look at. So that's all, and have a great rest of the week. And I'll get this recording sent out along with all the handouts.